Lover 1972 here. Um, this was a topic that was brought up in one of my YouTube groups that follow film, collecting movies and, you know, bringing up topics about films. And this particular topic addressed what are the best and the worst films of each of well-known directors. So I've got a whole bunch of directors that I have a list on, um, American directors and some foreign directors as well. So I'm going to bring it up on my computer here. Um, so just got to bring it up first here. Okay, so we got, let's see, how many film directors do we have? We have 37 directors. So I'm going to sort of go all over the map. So, anyways, let's start off with Steven Spielberg. His best film is, for me, is a tie. It's Minority Report with Tom Cruise and Schindler's List with Liam Neeson and Ben Kingsley. The same cinematographer was used on that movie, Janos, but on both movies, Janos Kaminski. Obviously Schindler's List is like a black and white kind of. It has the black and white cinematography to it, and Minority Report it's shot in color, but it's sort of in a darkish bluish color. And they're the more kind of serious films that Spielberg made that were more, how would you put it? They were more mature, I guess you could say, than the films that came before. Not that his films that came before were bad necessarily. Um, you know, Close Encounters was entertaining, and Raiders of the Lost Ark was one of the best action films I've ever seen. And you know, but I don't know. I mean, E.T. I don't think really is best when it comes to compared to Schindler's List or Minority Report. I think Minority Report is a much darker movie, and I think he took more chances with those types of movies. Schindler's List, handling the Holocaust. So those are my best for Spielberg. My worst, I was going in between two, and I think I'll go with AI. I thought it was pretty bad. I think Stanley Kubrick was supposed to make AI initially, and he just didn't go about doing it. I think he was supposed to make a film of the Holocaust too. I think it was going to be called what was it going to be called? The something Papers. Um, can't remember, but I think AI is pretty bad. Just it's too Spielberg can get a little bit sentimental, kind of sappy, kind of with his films, and that's really very very overly sentimental for me. Next one is Scorsese. The best film, of course, will always be Taxi Driver to me. Personally, it touches me, because it's the main character, Travis Bickle, is a very unique uh, film character in movie history. Um, and Yeah, it just has one of the greatest, has a great ending to the film, just beautiful cinematography and um, just very well thought out, very well done. The writer Paul Schrader, the director Scorsese, and the actor De Niro were like all in the same lane when they made this movie. There wasn't a lot of, like Scorsese said, there wasn't a lot on the commentary for Taxi Driver. He says there wasn't really a need to change anything when he got the script. It was just like perfect. So yeah, Taxi Driver. His worst movie to me is Kundun, which is about the Dalai Lama when he was, I think he was a teenager or a kid. Oh no, when he was a kid, that's the 7 years in Tibet with what's his face, Brad Pitt. But Kundun was when he's a young man, the Dalai Lama, and I just found it kind of dull. Ridley Scott, best film always will be Blade Runner. I get something out of it each time I watch it. Very heavy with symbolism and all these topics it tackles, like the environment, um, technology, um, eugenics, ethics, and you can see it from different points of view, like whether you believe in God or not, or whatever religion you believe in, or if you don't believe in, if you believe in science. That's why I like it so much, because you can approach it from different angles, and it's just beautifully shot. Um, Most of it's shot at night in the rain, and it must have been a nightmare to make, but it's just a beautiful film to watch. His worst movie, I think, is his first film, which came right before Blade Runner, which was his second movie, and he had made several commercials before that. But his worst movie to me is The Duelist, which was his first. Which technically, I mean, with Ridley Scott, I like a lot of his films, and like some of his films I haven't seen, so maybe they're worse than The Duelist. Like I think it's called A Good Year. Then he made a Russell Crowe after he made Gladiator. So for all I know, A Good Year might be worse than The Duelist. And The Duelist kind of reminds me of Barry Lyndon, which is one of my favorite films of all time. Of course, a lot of Kubrick films are a lot of my favorite films of all time, and Barry Lyndon is one of my favorite period films of all time. But The Duelist, he sort of he was working on a lower budget, and I don't think he had the capacity or um, the means to make a much more uh, detailed film at that point. Stanley Kubrick, of course, is going to be 2001. And of course, other films would take that place as well, like Clockwork Orange or Barry Lyndon, like I said before. Shining is one of the greatest horror films ever made. If I had to choose the best horror film ever made, it's going to be The Shining. Doctor Strangelove, one of the best comedies ever made. Paths of Glory, one of the greatest anti-war films ever made. But 2001 was like ahead with technologically, it was way ahead of its time. And, you didn't really have anything ahead of its time after that until you got to about Star Wars. His worst for me, I would say, is Lolita. It's a good film, but it's not a great film. It's decent. Christopher Nolan. Initially, I was going to say The Dark Knight. The Joker villain is fantastic in that movie, but I think I'll go with Inception, because it's a even though the dream logic is too literal, and I feel like Buñuel handles dream material much better than Christopher Nolan does. Like with Buñuel, when he shows dream imagery in his movies, he doesn't give you a rational explanation for it, and I think that's part of the reason why it works so well. Because if he explained it, it would take away the mystery of the dream. But I'd use Inception because visually it's unbelievable to watch. His worst, probably Follower or Following, the first one he made, which was made on a super low budget, but it's just the lesser of the ones he's made. James Cameron, I guess I'll go with T2, Terminator 2. It's one of the best action films I've ever seen. One of the best special effects films I've ever seen. It's got terrible acting, terrible dialogue, but I think it's a little bit better than other movies he's made. Terminator is good, yes. It's got good acting and good dialogue, much better in those departments than T2, but I don't know. T2 takes it to another epic level. His worst, in my opinion, is Avatar. It's sort of sickening to look at all the colors and the Navi are all this blue, and it's just kind of they're just too distracting, and it's too many suspended waterfalls in the air get kind annoying after a while. So too much eye candy, just kind of just too much. Peter Jackson, his best for me is King Kong. I think he's done the best version of King Kong. I think the two remakes, um, well, not the two. I think the Rick Baker remake in the '70s and the original one in the '30s are not as good as the Peter Jackson King Kong, and I think the reason for that is because the technology for making King Kong was on the cutting edge, and I think that's what makes it work. His worst movie, I think, is The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, the first Hobbit movie. Like the second Hobbit movie is a great, and if you watch the Desolation of Smaug extended edition, you'll see that he's flying by the seat of his pants, creating all these sorts of technical things. Um, he's not doing like a lot of storyboarding, Peter Jackson, for Desolation of Smaug, and yet it comes out incredible to watch. I think with Lord of the Rings, he planned those out a little bit more. But yeah, the first Hobbit is kind of a little bit of a bore, and I don't like it. When the dwarves are having dinner at Bilbo's house, it's kind of just dull. And one of the dwarfs wears a hat, like this hat with things sticking out of it, and I find it kind of annoying. Um, Fellini always is going to be La Dolce Vita, one of my favorite films of all time. The Good Life, where a reporter, a journalist is covering the wealthy and famous and royalty in Rome, Italy, and he stays up till dawn, sleeps with a different woman every night, and I just I used to have insomnia, so I mean I feel, and I like to write, and it just very good movie. His worst movie to me, some people might disagree with this. I Vita Loni. It's about young men in an Italian town, and like their coming of age story. Maybe, I don't know, but it's kind of a bore to me. Kurosawa always, of course, to be Throne of Blood. If I had to choose, maybe the best film, my favorite film that's spoken in another language, it'd have to be Throne of Blood. I would have to say it's based on Macbeth. It's a samurai film, and how Toshiro Mifune goes mad in the film is unbelievable. It's a great performance, beautifully done. Just I like that how the violence accentuates, makes it more beautiful in a sense. The the drama in the film, and Isuzu Yamada's performance of her wiping the blood off her hands when she has no blood on it, and how it ends with Toshiro Mifune's men and himself, and I'll leave it at that. It's a really good movie. I don't want to reveal too much. His worst to me is I Live in Fear, which is this film which addressed the atomic bomb after the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan. Maybe it was made in the 50s. I'm not quite sure. Toshiro Mifune makes an excellent performance in it because he plays an elderly man, and he wants to move himself and his family to Brazil and live in a bomb shelter. But I thought it was kind of presumptuous. I thought it was kind of preachy, and yeah. So that's like I think his worst. Maybe his worst might be Dodez Caden, but I haven't seen Dodez Caden in a long time. I bought it just because I like Kurosawa. It takes place in a junkyard. It was one of his biggest failures, but I think I'd go with Live in Fear. Fassbinder, a German director I really like a lot. This was kind of hard. I basically have two, but I added a third one as well. So one of my favorites are always Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant, about a 40-something-year-old fashion designer who falls in love with this woman named Karen, who she meets through a mutual friend of hers. And then Karen comes back after that, after she meets Petra von Kant, and they start arguing, and then she leaves. And I've done a review of this on my channel. This is a great movie. She begins to become obsessed with Karen, and it sort of affects her relationships with other people um, in her in her life. So yeah, that's a good movie. Beware of a Holy Whore. That's a film about a movie crew sort of marooned in a hotel in Spain. I think it's Spain, and it sort of touches on the concepts of or the idea of boredom, and also what a film crew and a film cast is like when what it's like the day to day ways they go about working on a movie, and how they're waiting for things to happen, waiting for money. And I also include World on a Wire, which is a mini series he did. It's sort of the Matrix before there was a Matrix. It was sort of well, I don't know, maybe it was known in Germany for a while, but um, I don't know if it was known to the rest of the world. So it has the Matrix concept to it. It's based on a book called something like Simulacrum something. His worst to me is a film called Quarrel. I think it was his last movie. Um, it's just this film of like male prostitution, and it's kind of boring. Um, Ozu, it's a tie. Maybe Tokyo Story would be my favorite, but I also like Late Spring as well. And you have in both of those particular movies Chishu Ryu and Sasukahara. Tokyo Story is like this film about these two elderly adult adults and their adult children, and how they have trouble connecting to them, and something happens to one of them, to one of the elderly parents. Late Spring is about a middle-aged, I guess she's middle-aged, uh, daughter living with her elderly father, and he wants her to move on with her life. So that's a pretty good movie. His worst is probably is There Was a Father, which I think was a propaganda film during the Japanese when they were in World War II. So obviously it sort of has a tinge of like propaganda to it. So I think I would say that's probably his worst. David Fincher, always going to be Fight Club, no question about that. I don't think he'll ever top it. It's a very quotable movie. I like it that's one of the reasons I like it. The way it's shot, the music, everything's great about it. Um, I think a lot of people are aware of Fight Club. His worst movie, Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Um, I think the screenwriter of Forrest Gump worked on this particular movie, and Benjamin Button is a film that Fincher he tried to show like a light side of himself, or tried to make a film that was on the light side. But his strength in making movies has always been showing the dark side of things, and that's why I think it's a big failure. Ingmar Bergman, the best will always be The Shane for me. It's one of the most depressing movies I've ever seen, about a violinist couple, um, and how they get thrown into this war between the country they live in and the country that's fighting that other country, and how it changes them as people. Like you would never expect them to change, and they do. His worst, and I know I'll get a lot of flack for saying this, but Fanny and Alexander. I know a fair amount of people that like Ingmar Bergman think Fanny and Alexander is his best movie, and I don't know. It's just maybe it's boring. Um, I'm not. Um, I don't know. It's just I can't connect with the film. I can't connect with the characters. Buñuel, again, it's a tie. Belle de Jour with Catherine Deneuve. Great film about a woman who decides to be a prostitute during the day, and how she goes about handling that in um, her regular day to day life. Viridiana, great film with Sylvia Pinel as a nun who's going to take her vows, but she's asked by her uncle to come to his ranch before she takes her vows, and something happens. His worst movie would be Phantom of Liberty. It's a bunch of incidents, but it's kind of weak. It's kind of a little bit of a bore. It's kind of interesting, being it's Buñuel, but I think it's one of his weaker movies. Jean-Luc Godard, always going to be Weekend. It's a culmination. It's the apex, I think, the summit of where his commercialism and his political views merge and create this like great apocalyptic movie with humor and also commentary. His worst movie is always going to be, to me, Contempt. It's just a big blown up art film done on a Hollywood type budget with Jack Palance and Fritz Lang. Fritz Lang's a great director, but it's a terrible movie. Jean-Pierre Melville, it's a tie. Army of Shadows, about the French resistance fighters during World War II against the Nazis. And I think it's not really a film that uses World War II as a backdrop. I think Melville was a person that liked to use, he liked to use cops and robbers or resistance fighters and Nazis as just basically two sides of the same coin, or um, like a gangster kind of ethic to it. But it's a good, fun, uh, interesting way of watching a movie. Um, just um, Army of Shadows is just interesting because of using that backdrop of World War II and making drama out of it. Basically, like a loyalty kind of thing, not ratting on the other side, So it has that gangster ethic to it. And then he made another film called La Samurai. Oh, and by the way, Army of Shadows was released, I think, in '69, maybe, but I think it was quickly shelved. And then Melville died in '73, and then it was re-released again in 2006 or 2009 or something, and then put on DVD after that. And it's also on Blu-ray. It's coming out on Blu-ray on Criterion. I think it's April, maybe. But very good movie. The Samurai. It's about a hitman who operates by the code of the samurai. He's played by Laurent Delon. His worst movie is L'Enfant Terrible. I think it's about these two young people. I haven't seen the film in a while. Maybe it takes place in one room. I'm not sure. I recall not liking it that much. Charlie Chaplin, it's going to be a tie. It's the Gold Rush in modern times. Gold Rush is a tearjerker at the end. Modern times is just trying to remember it. A lot of interesting bits of comedy in there, and it's dancing at the end, in the restaurant. His worst film to me, and maybe I'll get some flack for saying this, but City Lights. I thought I'd like it a lot more when I saw it, but it's not the greatest. I'm trying to remember it better, um, but it just didn't hit me right. Maybe I should watch it again. I'm not sure. Antonioni, best film is always going to be La Notte for me. It touches me personally. Maybe because the character played by Marcello Mastroianni is a writer, and I've written poetry in my past. And he has a hard time connecting with his wife, played by Jean Moreau. His worst movie is Red Desert. Um, I know he makes these very abstract movies that, you know, that they um, they're sort of the characters don't really quote act, but they sort of move around, if you will, like in La Cleese. Um, I'm having a hard time explaining what I'm talking about, but like they I can't explain what I'm talking about. It's just it's kind of an artificial type of acting, but it's for a purpose, if that makes any sense. But Red Desert's a little too pretentious for its own good. It was his first color film, and I think it's a little bit too much. Bertolucci, it's a tie. Last Emperor, I might do a video on Last Emperor. I really like this film a lot. It's about the last emperor of China, who's a Manchurian, whose name was Eisenjuro Puyi. And basically, he's been a puppet. He's a puppet emperor his whole life. You know, first by the Chinese government, then by the Japanese who occupied China, and then he becomes a prisoner of war in a communist prison. But you know, I might do a review of that movie. Conformist is another one of my favorites of his. I get mixed opinions about Conformist from other people. Some people think maybe it's too rigid, maybe. But you know, it is visually very beautiful. The sound is very well done. The production design is um, unbelievable to look at. So, regardless of what you think of the film, at least it is quite an achievement, I guess you could say. His worst is Little Buddha. It's pretty awful, pretty forgettable. With what's her name? Um, uh, um, Liv Tyler. Liv Tyler. She's in it, but it just I can't remember it that well, so it's pretty bad. Samuel Fuller, best film is Shot Corridor. Like how this journalist is going undercover in a psych ward, and I just like how he deals with being in there. His worst, I guess, because I was trying my best to think about it, but maybe it's the Steel Helmet, which I think was his first, which might not be terribly bad, but it's not most fantastic, I guess. Francis Ford Coppola, it's a tie. I would say basically it's Apocalypse Now, which I think is really not a film about the Vietnam War. It's a film more about war in general. But it's a beautiful work of art, you know, I think. And The Conversation is another film for that tie. And The Conversation basically, because I think it's like one of the unsung films of the 70s. Um, but I think it's sort of gone up in prominence and gone up in more people's awareness by now. But it's, you know, about this guy, Harry Call, and him listening in on a conversation that has some dangerous um, something dangerous about the conversation that he's going to get it maybe get in trouble with. Worst film he made was Cotton Club. I think it's bad because the musical numbers are good, but I think the reason why it's bad is because I think it's trying to be another Godfather, and it's not. It's just it seems too forced, I guess you could say. The acting seems kind of forced, and I can hear it awfully well. My hearing's bad, but Um, I just thought it wasn't the acting, the character development wasn't very natural. Fritz Lang, it's a tie. It's really good performance by Peter Lorre, very good use of sound and no sound at the same time. It was one of the first sound films, I think, for a German movie. And then the other film I like of his a lot is Metropolis, one of the best silent films ever. Um, I don't know if I have to say a lot about that, but it's had a huge influence on science fiction movies. The worst would be A Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabuse. His film, The Testament of Dr. Mabuse, which I think he released after M, that's pretty good. Um, that's worth watching. Um, but his Thousand Eyes of Dr. Mabuse that he made in the 60s is a throwaway movie. It's pretty forgettable. Clint Eastwood, his best, I would say, is Unforgiven. It's pretty dark, and I think, it's pretty. Um, it shows what happens when you go down a certain path. I guess I'm just brainstorming here. His worst to me is Gran Torino. Like the singing at the end he does, I find that kind of wince-inducing. Um, and I don't know. It just didn't hit me right. His helping this Oriental kid, this Asian American kid. Um, I don't know. It just I haven't seen it in a while, but I didn't like it that much. Now here's a director that probably, if you know me on my channel, I'm not wild about him. I like a few of his movies. I think he's overrated, of course, and that's Quentin Tarantino. But I do like Kill Bill Volume 1. I've seen it twice in the theater because I couldn't wait for it to come out on DVD. And you know what I'm going to say now. His worst movie for me, and now you know I'm I'm going to say one title, but actually I'm going to say two. Pulp Fiction, you know that. I think it's like too much dialogue, stagey, theatrical, talky, embellished dialogue. Just I can't stand that movie. And then Reservoir Dogs is the other one, which again is talky and just too theatrical. I just it's too poser. It's too hip looking. He's trying to be very hip, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. And it just screams like "look at me," and I just don't. It's not done very subtly. And the thing about Tarantino is his homages to different directors or culture. I think it's better to see what he got his stuff from rather than watching his movies in a way. Like seeing Leone films or seeing Sergio Corbucci movies, or like if you watch a Kill Bill movie, you'll hear music from Lady Snowblood, and if you see Lady Snowblood, it's worth seeing where he's got his influences from. So Sergio Leone, that's the next director. It's a tie. It basically is two, but then I thought, the third one I should also include, and so and it's not the full trilogy. The third one is a different film. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, a great classic. Um, One of the best westerns ever made. Double crossing each other and all that kind of stuff. For a few dollars more, is sort of the same kind of deal there. And another film that I saw that Jonathan Demme's rarely seen cinema, and I bought it, and it works very well. It's a great starting. um, and a very good dynamic playing off of James Coburn and Rod Steiger. It's called Duck You Sucker, or also known as Fistful of Dynamite. Next director is Paul Verhoeven. His best film is RoboCop, in my opinion. Very quotable, lots of fun, very enjoyable film. It sort of echoes the Reagan kind of we're going to get the bad guy kind of um, e- um, morality at the time. Like the glorification of violence or whatever. I don't know, but really good movie. His worst movie is Showgirls. Just very. I think it's over 2 hours. Maybe it's 2 hours and a half, and it's kind of a bore. Tarkovsky, his best is Ivan's Childhood. Of course, the thing about Ivan's Childhood is I think he took it over from another director, so that's why it's so drastically different from his other movies. Because most of Tarkovsky's films have these extremely long takes that take several minutes before he does another cut. Um, and there are other great films he's made, like Stalker and what's it called? Oh, uh, Nostalgia, Sacrifice. But his worst for me would have to be Solaris because it's a little bit of a bore. I don't get starting part of the film where they're having a car move through the highways of Tokyo or Japan or wherever, and where they're floating in this room in the movie, um, and there's some like architecture that's not very space. Um, um, it doesn't look very science fiction like, so it kind of takes you out of that film that way. Next director is Roman Polanski. It's a tie. Knife in the Water, one of the best debut films of all time. Or just saw another director because of a debut movie. I'll say him right after this, after Polanski. But Knife in the Water, deceptively simple film about a married couple who pick up a hitchhiker while they're while they're going on a sailing trip for the weekend, and the vying for the attention of the wife, the hitchhiker, and the husband. Really good movie. Lots more to it than just that. And his second film, Repulsion, with Catherine Deneuve, about a very repressed young girl and how she starts imagining things in an apartment. His worst to me is Frantic with um, Harrison Ford. I can't remember it awfully well, but I know I didn't like it. It was just just didn't seem very natural, maybe forced. I can't remember awfully well. The director I forgot was David Lynch, and I think there's a tie for the two films that taste is best. Eraserhead, one of the best debut features of a film director. Very nightmarish. There's no like logical explanation for everything, and that's good. Um, and his other film that's one of the best of the century, um, Mulholland Drive, sort of like the Hollywood dream, the American dream, and just the absurdity of it is very beautiful. His worst movie for me would have to be, I would say, Wild at Heart. I'm not wild about Wizard of Oz. I think it's overrated, kind of, and I just think it's just a little too overdone. Like when what's her name? She was in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Um, Laura Dern's mother, whatever her name is, when she's covering her face up with lipstick. I found that kind of annoying. And there's another director I just thought of. Oh yeah, Paul Thomas Anderson. He made, I think, what's considered the greatest film of this 21st century, and that's There Will Be Blood. About greed, about one of the worst, um, just a guy that's consumed by greed and will do anything to get it. Paul Thomas Anderson's worst movie to me probably would be, let's see, yeah, Inherent Vice. Yeah, I just didn't go anywhere for me. Let's see, who do we have next here? Oh, Krzysztof Kieslowski. His best film to me is in the Colors trilogy. Colors trilogy itself is good. He's made some other good movies. I did a review of the Decalogue miniseries. It's my most watched video on YouTube. But his favorite, my personal favorite of his is White, because of what the main character goes through and how he deals with it and how he resolves what he's been put through. His worst movie to me is Blind Chance. Oh, no, it isn't Blind Chance. I put that there, but that's not right. Because that's what came to my mind. It's Double Life of Veronique. Double Life of Veronique is his worst movie. I know it has sort of the doppelganger thing to it, but two women in two different places in Europe and that look similar. Kind of interesting idea, but I think it's his worst. Werner Herzog, best, Gary Wrath of God, about a guy getting caught up in his madness and wanting to gain wealth in El Dorado. He's going down the Amazon. I just thought it was brilliant. His worst film to me is a film called Wojciech, which is based off a stage play. And it's just kind of a bore, I guess you could say. It's just maybe it's overacted, too theatrical. I don't know. It's just a bore. David Lean, of course, the best is always going to be Lawrence of Arabia, one of my favorite films of all time. Just that's the film I upgraded to Blu-ray because it does look good in Blu-ray. I won't get 4K, but I think if you get 4K, Lawrence of Arabia probably will look fantastic in 4K probably. His worst film, Brief Encounter. It's earlier in his career, like in the late 40s. It's about a man and a woman meeting at a train station. But I don't know. Maybe its understatedness is its appeal. So maybe it's a good film for all I know. Maybe people, because I know that it gets a lot of praise, but for me it doesn't really match up to Lawrence of Arabia. But of course, it's not the same kind of a movie. Ron Howard. If people watch my channel, they know I think he's pretty mediocre director, but he has made a few good movies, and one is his best is Cocoon. It's a tearjerker. I really enjoyed it when I saw it in the 80s. But now I'm going to get pelted with stones or burned at the stake for seeing Apollo 13, which I think is a big pretentious film. Like when scenes like Tom Hanks is talking to Catherine Quinlan and he's saying to her, "Look up there, honey. I'm flying up to the moon," and like scene where Catherine Quinlan's character, her character's mother is in the living room of the house. She's sitting on the sofa and she's saying to her mother, "Mom, this is Buzz Aldrin." So it's just so soaked in artifice or pretension or just it's so too aware of itself. It just I don't know if I buy Gary Sinise's performance, of he wants to go to the moon, but he gets rejected, and it just seems very. I guess it's a true story, but it just didn't work. Um, let's see, who's next? Robert Zemeckis. Best film he made was Forrest Gump to me. It is kind of I don't know, kind of how can you put this about Forrest Gump? You know, aw shucks kind of sounding, like kind of cute kind of story about this guy who just happens to be at all these events, but it's charming in that way. It's a kind of a charming movie. His worst movie, I'm going to be pelted with stones for saying this, of course, but it's Back to the Future, in my opinion. I sort of got tired of it. I think I liked it when it first. Well, I did like it when it first came out, but now not so much. Brian De Palma. I had to think about this a little bit, and then I basically, I thought two, and then you know what? I have to have three. So Scarface is the definite one. Scarface is sort of like a guilty pleasure to me. And it's a very quotable film. I think it's a lot of fun to watch. But he has made some other good films. I think Carlito's Way, I would put, but I haven't seen it in a long time, and I can't remember it awfully well, so I'm not putting it on best. Dress to Kill is another one that's in the tie because it's just visually very well put together. And Sisters, same case, very well put together. And I deliberated whether Sisters should go with the other two, but Sisters is pretty well put together, and it's pretty the paranoia in it is very well done. The worst one he made, I don't know if it's a worst, but I guess it's his worst. Blowout. Technically, it's pretty well put together, I guess, but I don't know. I think the same idea is better developed in the Antonioni movie Blow Up, using image rather than sound. So I'll go with Blowout as worst. Orson Welles, it's going to be a tie. Citizen Kane, one of my favorite films of all time. But I think he's also made a lot of other great movies, and one of them being Touch of Evil, which is another one. As far as worst go, I had thought of Magnificent Ambersons because it was. I don't know if I don't think it's ever been like totally well put together because of how mangled it got and how the studio like really butchered the film. But since I really haven't seen the film in its entirety, I have yet to watch it in a complete sense. I'm going to go with Mr. Arcaden. I do have Mr. Arcane, and I haven't watched it in a while, so maybe it's good if I watch it. But I think it's kind of I found it kind of boring when I watched it, so I'll go with that. Hitchcock. It's always going to be Vertigo for me. It's a different film from the rest of Hitchcock's films. Vertigo has that air of mystery to it. I think some other Hitchcock films have some mystery elements to them that are not tied up, but Vertigo really goes out there and is a very beautiful looking, well put together film. His worst movie is Trouble with Harry. It's a one trick pony. It's a dead body in a clearing and people discovering it, and it gets boring very quickly. Oliver Stone, best film Platoon. I think it's one of the best Vietnam War films ever made because it's about an actual. Oliver Stone actually fought in Vietnam, so he knows what it's like there. His worst, and I've heard some people on YouTube YouTube basically saying they like it a lot because they like the Doors. I like the Doors a lot, and I've read a few books about Jim Morrison, and I've watched some documentaries and concerts of the Doors. But frankly, the Doors movie, it evokes the atmosphere of the time period, but it doesn't really. I don't think it really gets it exactly right. It's more of a tangent film than a specific. It doesn't have any like specific point to it. It just seems like a bunch of incidents. That's the way I view it. Okay, so I think I've said them all. Yeah, I've said them all now. So those are all my favorite films and least favorite films of all those directors that I just told you, um, and the ones I just added on, which were Paul Thomas Anderson, David Lynch, and I think there's another guy, but you'll know because you're watching this video. So thanks for watching all the way through. I'm gonna get off my Pages document so I can see the camera again. So yeah, so um, that's it for the video. Oh, I can't believe I've gone on 51 minutes, but I have. I'm gonna stop now. You heard me enough. Thanks for watching, and leave any feedback down below. Thanks for watching. Bye now. So as it says, I forgot a director, and he's a pretty important director to me, and that's Terrence Malick. My favorite Terrence Malick film is The New World. I like Knight of Cups quite a bit too. Maybe that's a tie. Yeah, but New World is beautiful. The Wagner music, um, just incredible to watch, and the relationship between John Smith and Pocahontas and the other John, whatever his name is, that is played by Christian Bale after um, um, Colin Farrell leaves the story. I love that movie, and I have the Criterion of it with 3 different cuts. I still have to watch my Criterion. I had the another version before that, but I love that movie. It's got all the behind the scenes stuff. I just think it's fantastic, and I think Night of Cups I might include with that too. I just like the grandness of it. I can't remember it awfully well, but I like it. I think the one I think I like the least would be Badlands. It's just kind of might have been Terrence Malick's first film, and I don't know. It just didn't stick with me. Maybe because it's a teen angst film, or maybe it was a bore to me. I don't know, but it's my least favorite. I like Terrence Malick a lot. He's a really good director. That's it. Bye now for good.